name is Danielle Meert. I am the founder of MOshrooms Regenerative Microfarm. This is our second location. This is my husband's house. I have another place out in Ellisville. And I started this project because when I was down at the University of New Orleans, where I ended up getting my master's degree, the research I was working on was in the Coastal Plant Sciences Lab, and we were looking at the effects of nitrogen and phosphorus pollution and how that affects plant community composition 700 miles downstream. The wetlands are absolutely decimated. The natural barrier that we have to mitigate storm surge from hurricanes is extremely unhealthy. Not only do we have nutrient pollution changing plant community composition, there's also the oil pipelines that are transecting all of the wetlands. So when storms come in, instead of having the storms go through the delta, like tidal inlets, they just have a straight shot right into the heart of New Orleans, and we all saw the result. So I decided when I came back to Missouri and bought a house that I was going to make a demonstration garden and show people, what we can do that is not lawn. Everyone else just has lawn all the way down the street. But I am adamant that we don't need to have lawns. They don't provide any ecological benefits, except I guess they stop the soil from eroding. But they don't provide habitat, they don't provide wildlife, they don't provide food. And there's so many more interesting things that we can do. Instead of just doing everything in the backyard, I wanted to be front and center. The only thing I did not do myself was this rain garden right here. I applied for the MSD Project Clear small grant program, and we hired someone to put in a rain garden in the front yard. Again, instead of doing it in the backyard where no one would see it, rain garden in the front yard right where it's front and center. And I hired Custom Foodscaping to do that project for me. And I was just really nervous. I didn't want to flood the basement. And we started with that. And then I put in a small little rain garden right here behind you on the street. I have another rain garden over here on the side. I don't know if you can see the rain chains on either side of the house. All of the neighbors, all of the water goes into the sewer. It goes directly into River de Pere. We have flash flooding in River de Pere. We are the only house on this whole street that does not send all of our water directly into the sewer into River de Pere. So we're gonna head into the backyard and talk a little bit about composting. We're gonna start with bokashi composting. Bokashi is where you ferment your food waste in a container. So I wish I had started bokashi a long time ago. I did not have good information on it. It seemed like a lot of work. But what you do with bokashi composting, instead of hot composting something, you ferment something in a sealed container. I got this system from BLH Farm. It's got like a little valve on it. And I don't have brand. They usually have this thing as brand. It's like effective microorganisms. I bought it from BLH Farm. But you sprinkle the bran in your container, and then you dump your food waste in. In order to ferment your food waste, you got to get all the oxygen out. So you got to smash everything in. You can smash with whatever you want. And you seal it up. But you have to drain the liquid off, the leachate that forms. And this little BLH composter is great. It's got a valve where you can collect the leachate. But one of the things is with this is it does leak a little bit. The valve leaks. But you can make your own, and I'll show you to make your own. But with the leachate, instead of worm tea, where you can use worm tea to water your plants, you dilute this leachate 50 parts to 1. It can use the leachate to water your plants. Bokashi composting has been a game changer for me. But you drain the liquid out. But yeah, it smells like fruity. It's been fermenting for, I think this is probably 2 weeks old. But one thing with bokashi composting, when it's done, when it's fermented, it looks exactly the same. Like the food waste, it looks the same. It doesn't look like it's decomposed at all. It's just fermented. And after you have fermented the food waste, then you can use it to feed your worms. We're gonna build a worm bin. Can hot compost it. You can feed the bokashi to your chickens or your ducks. They won't typically eat a lot of raw food waste. They don't think it's palatable, but if you ferment it, then they'll eat it. And it's kind of like probiotics. You don't have to buy a system. You can also just get 2 buckets that are the same size. I recommend square buckets, not round buckets, because the round buckets stick together and you'll never get them apart. But you can just take a square bucket and drill holes on the bottom. And then that's your drainage system. And then you collect liquid in the other bucket. And instead of having to drain your leachate into something else, you can just have it in the bottom of this. So same thing. Take your food waste, put it in the bucket. The ducks think it's something exciting. And like hot compost, this will collapse down. Like if you build like a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot hot compost, it will collapse down and become, a fraction of the size. Same thing with this. So I usually will have to fill these a couple times before they fill up. So you want to get this as full as possible because it's anaerobic process. That means you don't want any oxygen in there. And then you just have to let it sit and ferment until it's done. And usually, ideally, there's going to be like a fluffy white mold across the top. That does not always happen. If you're concerned about it, you're like, oh, I don't know if this is fully fermented or not, then you would hot compost it or bury it in your yard. This is 100% food waste. I put meat, I put dairy. I compost everything. I know people say don't compost dairy or meat, but I absolutely do. In a worm bin, you want to keep that pretty cool. The worms like the temperature to be, like 80 degrees. If you're going to compost meat or things like that, you have to get it up to, I think, is it 135 degrees for like a minimum of 5 days or something like that. Worm bins can't get that hot. The worms will die. Can't compost meat in a worm bin unless you ferment it first. Okay. If you ferment the meat, then it's okay. The pH tanks initially and it gets pretty acidic. So actually right away, like the first time you drain the leachate, I just dump that out and use it on the compost. I don't put that on the plants because the pH is really not great for the plants. But then the pH will normalize, like stabilize, and then it's something that you could put on the plants. The process of fermenting this method, it kills the harmful pathogens that could potentially live in a worm bin. Now we're going to do a quick worm bin. Same thing with the bokashi. There's going to be leachate in the bottom, and you don't want your worms to drown. The worms like it a little bit moist, but not too moist. If it rains really hard, the worms will leave the soil and go out on your sidewalk and they will die. And they're very particular. They have delicate little soft bodies, so they want it to be a little bit damp, but not too damp. Worms need to be in the shade. I have, you can see holes in the bottom for drainage. So you want to make sure that there's drainage holes so it doesn't, water does not accumulate. They should also have air holes on the side. Now with worms, one of the things I think people have the biggest problem with worms is they overfeed them. Worms can thrive mainly just on their own bedding. They need some food, but they don't need a ton of food. You can use anything for bedding. These egg cartons are fantastic, but I really like cardboard boxes. But with the cardboard, you just make sure you get all the tape off if you can. I do a really thick layer of carbon bedding. I use cardboard. I put it on the bottom, on the sides. Creates little microclimates for the worms. If there happens to be like a little hot patch, they can always like scoot over to the side and not have to worry. One of the things I love doing is making cardboard tubes. They need oxygen, so you don't want to smash it out. You can use toilet paper rolls, and not just like one toilet paper roll, but like stuff them inside another one. Usually vertically and horizontally. That way there is some oxygen getting in, some airflow. And these also are the black soldier fly larvae. They are the best composters. They lay their eggs in the cardboard, and the chickens and ducks love to eat them. They are a treat. It doesn't have to be cardboard. You can use leaves, you can use aged wood chips. I do a lot of dry bedding on the bottom because the liquid will leach down. But you don't want anything in there to be like super damp or super dry. They are very particular about the moisture levels. So this is some aged compost that's already gone through the hot compost system. You can put that in there. I also put, this is dandelions. If you're doing this on a small scale and you have your bedding for your worms in, you can just put food waste in like one corner, and then you slowly move the food waste from like this corner to this corner and have the worms kind of migrate across your worm bin. That way, after a month or 2 months when you're done filling it, you can just harvest on one side and all the worms will have migrated over to the other side. And then you would take your worms, usually it'd have a whole container of them, and transfer some of your worms into the bin. So this is my filtering screen. It's 1/2 inch hardware cloth that I've attached just to this little frame. Yeah, usually I'll have just like a little system set up on the ground. The system, it's just a bunch of buckets on top of more buckets. I'll dump a bucket of unfiltered compost on it, and then the ducks will come in and they will like root around, and they eat a lot of worms, but they also help filter at the same time. So I try to let them do as much work for me. You don't have to filter your compost. Most people, you know, you can just go put it in your yard. But since I usually give it back to my customers, they like it nice and fluffy and pretty. So anything that doesn't go through the filter, I will then put it as bedding for the next worm bin. So it's not decomposed. If it's soil, you know, it's going in the garden. If it's not broken down yet, it just goes into the next system. This is the hot compost. I have it covered with cardboard. By tomorrow, there will be black soldier fly larvae. Like, just when I take the cardboard off, it'll just be like an inch of black soldier fly larvae. For the winter, my plan is to grow plants in the buckets on top of the hot compost this winter. So it's going to be like a heat source from the hot compost coming up. And I'm going to cover this with some plastic, like a shower curtain or something. So it'll be like a little greenhouse, and hopefully I'll have like lettuce or something growing in here on top of the hot compost all winter. So we're going to have these little totes on each of the composts. In the gangway over there, I have a whole row of worm bins. Above the worm bins, I have buckets with plants growing in them, trying to maximize the space.
Can you talk a little bit about when you're looking at your yard, where you should put it for it to be the most effective and to want to keep using it? Like, how far do you want it from your house, and make it convenient but not, you know, problematic for animals or anything like that?
I originally had the hot compost like literally right behind our house. The closer it is to your house, the more likely you're going to manage it and use it appropriately. The further away the compost is from your kitchen, the less likely you're going to manage it well. I'm not a huge fan of having it in the far back corner because I got to go like all the way back there. It should be, number one, in the shade. If you can have a hot compost pile, it should probably be in the shade, which is again why I wanted it next to the house, because that's south and the house would shade it a little bit. But you also, if you're on a hill or something, you would have it probably at the top of the hill. Like, if you have to go like all the way down to the bottom of the hill and then come back up, that's an issue. Also, your nutrients aren't going onto your plants. If you have it at the top of the hill, you know, anytime it rains, the nutrients from the compost pile will, you know, filter down the hill and it'll be absorbed into your garden. You want it to be convenient. Another important thing with hot compost and worms, the main thing is moisture. It has to be a little bit moist, but not too wet. If it's dry, if you put in dry wood chips, they won't decompose. Like, I don't know, I'm sure, has your parent ever yelled at you for putting like a wet towel on the ground? Like, don't put the wet towel on the bathroom floor or on the hardwood floor, right? Because it'll decompose your hardwood floor, right? If it's a dry towel on the floor, it'll be fine. But if it's a wet towel, it'll start to it'll get moldy and nasty. So if you want it to break down, it has to be a little bit wet. I admittedly don't really turn my hot compost piles very much. I put a lot of cardboard tubes in, so they have like airflow, hopefully. And then eventually I'll pull the cardboard tubes out, so it's like a whole, like a shaft. Yeah, the only time I turn mine is when I'm taking them apart, and then it'll go into the worm compost or into the garden. I don't really turn mine. I know you're supposed to turn your compost. But yeah, worm bins you don't compost or you don't turn on. The worms, just they're great. They're lazy. They don't like to be disturbed. You just cover it and let them go, and that's more my speed. I got other stuff to do than, you know, like hang out with the ducks and grow stuff.